Andrew Jupiter, author of Red, White, and Black Gold, 50-Year Journey in the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Industry, and his lovely wife, Dr. Clarice Macmillan Jupiter, and daughter, Leanne Jupiter, former ministers of government, former and current permanent secretaries, government and industry professionals, dean, deputy deans, heads of departments, colleagues, students, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is indeed a pleasure to see so many of you present here to celebrate with Professor Andrew Jupiter and his family the launch of his book, Red, White, and Black Gold, a 50-year journey in the Trinidad and Tobago energy industry. I am Rafi Hussein from the Department of Chemical Engineering, UWI, and Master of Ceremonies for this evening event. There will now be a safety briefing.
The University of the West Indies places high priority on preserving your health and safety. Please give me your attention for a few moments as I outline the emergency procedures to be followed at today's event. This building is equipped with a fire alarm system, and in the event of an emergency, the alarm will sound. Please note that we have no planned drills for today, so if the alarm sounds, we will treat it as a real emergency. Once the alarm has sounded, or in the event of an emergency, calmly make your way through one of the exits. This lecture theatre has 3 exits, 2 to the front of the theatre, 1 at the middle of the room. There are 2 additional exits to the side of the room, and these exits are labeled as emergency exits. Only open the emergency exit doors if the alarm sounds or there is an emergency. Once outside the theatre, make your way to the assembly area, which is at the back of this building, east of your present location on the field. Stay at the assembly area point and await further instructions. In the event of an earthquake, stay calm. There are no tables under which we can cover. Keep low, hold on, and look out for falling debris. Once the shaking stops, exit the building in a calm and orderly manner and assemble at the assembly area where you will receive further instructions. Thank you.
Please let us all stand as our national anthem will now be played. Please be seated. I would now invite Pastor Dr. David Ned to say a prayer.
Good evening to the distinguished guests who are here today, faculty and staff of the university, friends and family members. We want to thank you so much for being here today. Permit me just to do one thing before I pray today, which is to acknowledge 5 people. They're not here with us, but they are applauding the achievement of my brother today with the launching of his book. His aunt, May Matthews, he had the benefit of having 2 fathers, James Norrie and Augustine Ned. His brother, Victor White, and his mother, Maud Jupiter Ned. I want to acknowledge these people today because of the significant contribution they made in his life. And I can't begin to imagine what their reaction would be on a day like this. Would you please join me in bowing your heads as we pray at this time? Dear Lord, as we pause in this moment of celebration, we want to thank you for your goodness. We want to thank you for your faithfulness. We want to thank you for directing Andrew Jupiter through his life journey. He acknowledges that you, O Lord, guiding his path into the oil industry in 1971, when he was employed in Shell Trinidad Limited as a lab tech. Lord, through every assignment, promotion, or appointment, you guided him with your eyes, with your hands, and your spirit. And it's evidenced in his new role as an author, which chronicles in this his first book, Red, White, and Black Gold, the stunning achievements led by your mighty hands. Lord, we want to thank you for the many persons you positioned around Andrew to assist in his development of becoming an expert in the oil industry, and for the many contributors to the authoring of this book. I ask you, dear Lord, to bless this book, to bless its circulation, and in the similar fashion that you led Andrew around the world, representing this nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I pray, Almighty God, that the circulation of this book will follow his path in the many nations he has visited. I also pray, God, that as many review and debate this book, there'll be encouragement to others to read this book. I also ask, Lord, that this book will serve as a centerpiece in the discussions regarding the repositioning of Trinidad and Tobago's future and its role in the renewable energy sector. Now, Lord, may you continue to shower your blessings upon him and his family. There is no doubt, God, that this is just the first stop in his authorship, and that, Lord, we pray that you would give him all of that wisdom that you've provided throughout the years to continue to write more and to share through the power of his experience. Lord, may you bless all of the persons who are gathered here today in this celebration. Thank you, Almighty God, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Spirit. Amen.
Ned, I would now invite the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, University of the West Indies, Professor Edwin Ekwe, to make some welcoming remarks.
Mr. Chairman, Professor Ravi Hussein, former ministers of government, permanent secretaries, captains of industry, deputy deans, heads of departments, colleagues, specially invited guests, Professor Andrew Jupiter and his wife, Dr. Clarice Jupiter, and the daughter, the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am especially honored this evening as as the Dean of Faculty of Engineering to welcome you all to the University of West Indies at the book launch of Professor of Practice Andrew Jupiter. The title of the book, as you know already, is Red, White, and Black Gold, a 50-year journey in Trinidad and Tobago energy industry. I'm even more delighted to welcome you today as Trinidad and Tobago celebrates its 46th year of republicanism in 2 days' time. Happy Republic Day to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to celebrate this month 60 years of independence of Trinidad and Tobago. This is actually a month of celebration. Today, we celebrate Professor Andrew Jupiter's journey of 50 years in Trinidad and Tobago energy industry. I have been his colleague for the last 9 years, and I can attest to the partnership with which he has developed, linking academic to industry. This partnership has resulted in millions of dollars to the University of the West Indies to ensure the continuity of its programs in the Petroleum Studies Unit in particular. Today, we will receive a glimpse from different areas of his 50-year journey in Trinidad and Tobago energy industry. The chapters of this book would include, number 1, Petroleum in My DNA. Second chapter will deal with growing up in the town that oil built. Third chapter will deal with boundless faith in our destiny. The fourth chapter will be Trinidad and Tobago petroleum model, the mechanisms for governance. The sixth chapter will be natural gas economy at a pivotal moment. The seventh one will be South-South cooperation and other internationalization strategies. Then the eighth chapter will be on the fourth generation of gas-based development. Then we'll be dealing with the ninth one will be National Oil Company. Then the 10th one will be inevitable energy transition. Then the 11th one will be linking academia to industry. And then the 12th, but one of the most important chapters, will be leadership for the next generation. So my role today is being one that I deem that is very important as I welcome you as the Dean of Faculty of Engineering at UWI to this momentous occasion, launching of Red, White, and Black Gold, a 50-year journey in Trinidad and Tobago energy industry, written by our well-known professor, Professor Andrew Jupiter. So I congratulate him for this scholarly work. He has done very well. He has projected the faculty in many ways and the university in general. So we thank him for what he has done, not only for the present generation, for even the future generation. And we are pleased and we are happy for his great achievements. So please, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all, and please relax and be part of this historic journey of our able professor. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, and please enjoy this evening. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dean Ekwe, for those welcoming remarks. Many of you may know Andrew Jupiter as an energy professional and now professor of practice at the UWI. He is a man who is always dedicated to his profession, to Trinidad and Tobago, to his family, friends, and associates, and to God. You may have been and is still associated with him remotely or face to face in one way or the other, as a working colleague in government and the energy sector, as your professor, your mentor, friend, husband, father, brother, perhaps meeting at cricket venues or on the golf course, or you may have seen him on television or the newspaper. If you don't know about him and the history of our energy industries, then you must read his book. If you do know him, you still have to read his book, which will certainly bring back memories on energy events and impacts on education, our people, our communities, and our country. Let this book launching ceremony be your starting point as we now listen to contributions being made by professionals well known to the author. I will now invite Mr. Leroy Williams, Human Resource Consultant, to make his contribution.
Thank you, Professor Hussein. Professor Ekwe, Dean of the Faculty, Professor Jupiter, his wife, Clarice, and daughter, specially invited guests. My name is Leroy Williams, as you've heard, and I'm here this afternoon because I am Andrew Jupiter's friend. Friend of very long standing, and he has asked me to look at two chapters, chapters 1 and 7, and 3, and has allocated 5 minutes in which to do that review. Chapter 1, as you've heard, is entitled Petroleum in My DNA, and it chronicles his early childhood and young adult experiences in Grande Riviere and Point Fortin, from elementary school to completion of his undergraduate degree and marriage to his dear wife, Clarice. And these account for 6 pages. Like someone else of high standing, he skimmed through those early years and has asked me just to add some more meat and flesh to them. His good fortune was to be born in the oil town of Point Fortin and to be raised and schooled at Grande Riviere. He straddled 2 worlds. One, the idyllic seaside village of Grande Riviere, and, as he so correctly recalls, with no electricity, study with kerosene lamps, where the main economic activity was fishing and agriculture, no savanna recreation ground, no community center. And he had the benefit of the other. The bustling oil town of Point Fortin, to which he was whisked away during the long school vacation, where he enjoyed the benefits of its developing infrastructure and amenities, electricity, exposure to sporting facilities, and most significantly, oil, black gold. And he would return rather excitedly from the long mid-year school vacation and regale me with stories and exploits of Clarence and Cecil Macmillan and the likes of Henry Quanvey, who played for Shell. I had never seen a football or a football field. He may not have known it then, but I'm sure he acknowledges it now that he was the most privileged student in the entire school. I am sure that these would ring a bell to him. Brevity is the soul of wit. Waste not, want not. Hitch your wagon to a star. Time and tide wait on no man. There's a tide in the affairs of men, which when taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. What were these? These were some of the quotations that adorned the school walls above our heads, just below the ceiling. They kept vigil over us in the old, leaky wooden building that was the Grande Riviere Anglican School that doubled as the Grande Riviere Anglican Church that doubled as the Grande Riviere EC School. They served as words of wisdom and inspiration, and from time to time would be subjects of admonition and counsel, particularly when there was some infraction of school rules and some acts of indiscipline. Everyone walked to school, whether you lived in Montevideo, 2.5 miles away, or, as Professor Jupiter did, 3/4 mile from the school. Some with slippers, hardly any with shoes, most of us barefooted. At the entrance of the schoolyard, there was a standpipe which served the needs of both the school and the neighboring villages. Students were responsible for school sanitation. A nice way of saying that we cleaned the school building, we cleaned the schoolyard, and the school retreats. In today's world, that would be considered abuse. How then does a school like this from a village, as I've described, prepare 6 students for common entrance in 1960 and secure 4 passes, one of whom was an exhibitioner? There were a cadre of homegrown teachers in Grande Riviere. Rita Lindsay, who taught infants, Conrad White, who taught standards 1 to 3. He knew how to challenge and motivate students. You got 100%, 25 cents. Maureen Elder Simon, Patricia Matthews, and Kenneth Simon. One term each in standard 4. Non-trained teachers, all products of the monitor system, and all fervent, dedicated, motivated. And there was Fitzroy et Albert Thomas, headmaster as he was called then, who prepared us for common entrance. What did he bring? He brought inspiration, confidence, enlightenment, excellence. Fitzroy was a product of the North Coast, from Kumana to be exact. He married and settled in Mount Lambert, and after having taught in a number of schools and institutions along the East-West Corridor, he was in 1960 transferred to Grande Riviere EC School for his first posting as headmaster. Fortunately for him, he had an aunt in the village at whose home he stayed during the week. He traveled from Mount Lambert on Monday mornings and returned on Friday afternoons. His wife was also a teacher. She was at Tranquility Government. Just let me digress a minute for a short moment. Mr. Thomas had a friend and mentor, a gentleman by the name of Fitzjames Emmanuel Williams, and I see somebody smiling in the front row, who was from Tacarigua, and Fitzjames is no relation of mine. They worked together at a few institutions. Fitzy was considered a rebel, and as punishment was banished to Toko Anglican School. Well, Fitzy created a storm on the North Coast. a delightful storm. He became actively involved in the cultural life of the North Coast and organized the largest community concert ever on the North Coast, where he brought performers from all the villages to perform in a massive event on the Toko Recreation Ground. But that wasn't all. In addition, he sent shockwaves through the country when he took a student from Toko, someone by the name of Winston Roberts, you would know Professor Jupiter, and he trained and coached him to become the champion soloist in the National Music Festival with his rendition of "Oh Danny Boy," defeating all comers, including foreign trained singers. Fitzjames was promptly brought back from Toko. So it was on the back of all that Fitzroy Thomas went to Grande Riviere in 1960. He went with the knowledge that with proper exposure and leadership, performances from the North Coast could rival the best in the country. He organized school concerts, participation in choral speaking events, revitalized the religious life of the school, gave free lessons, instilled discipline, and drilled his students using practice books that the schools in Port of Spain used. The result, as I said, was 4 successes from 6 students who wrote the exam in 1963, among whom is Professor Jupiter today. And unfortunately, Mr. Thomas died a few years ago. Had he been alive, you'd have been celebrating 100 this year. He died at the age of 94, hoping to attain his 100. Now, if anybody makes 100 in arithmetic, then that person you know is destined for greatness. And that is Professor Andrew Jupiter. He made 100 in arithmetic, and try as I may, I was never able to accomplish that. Chapter 3, with boundless faith in our destiny, which we all recognize is a line from our national anthem, deals almost exclusively with the formidable contribution of our late Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. His treatment of Dr. Eric Williams in that chapter reveals a strong admiration for the late Prime Minister, and as he says, he felt a profound personal loss when he died, even though he had never met him or had known him. The chapter explores the early life of Eric Williams and details the experiences which led him to let his bucket down in Trinidad and Tobago and become involved in active politics. Perhaps it was because of his active involvement in politics and his association with political party that Eric Williams, in a rather hollow manner, and sometimes rather grudgingly, is now referred to as Father of the Nation, without any clear and distinctive reasoning and analysis beyond that he was the country's first Prime Minister. Professor Jupiter addresses this, and he confronts the reader with some of the significant post-1956 events as embodied in the first, second, and third 5-year development plans, and outlines some of the infrastructure development undertaken during that period. In his discussion of the first 5-year development plan, he comments, interestingly, petroleum Trinidad and Tobago's main revenue generating sector was not specifically mentioned in the plan, but would have been included under industry. A point made by Dr. Williams in his presentation of the 1958 budget on the 30th December 1957, where he noted that in 1958, Canada would be celebrating its centenary of oil. 1959, the USA centenary celebration of oil by Drake. And in 1957, the centenary of the first oil well drilled at La Brie. That well was abandoned at 280 feet. But he made the comment, it is singularly appropriate in the light of these centenaries that we should pay special attention in this budget to the oil industry in Trinidad. More so, as this, curiously enough, has never been attempted before, except to reel off statistics about oil and to repeat parrot cries of the importance of oil to the economy. The first and only serious investigation of the mainstay of Trinidad's economy over the 5 decades, he commented, was made 30 years ago when Sir Thomas Holland was invited by the Trinidad government to make a survey of the oil industry of Trinidad. And this formed the background for the Mustafi Commission of Inquiry, which Professor Jupiter analyzes at length in chapter 3. Another thing about chapter 3, which I find rather very commendable, was his dealing with, as he says, the battle for Chaguaramas. While not a political document, a document that deals with politics or economics, the fact that he at length looked at this battle, as he terms it, for Chaguaramas, is important and instructive. It is an event that has significance for the political developments in this country, but it is an event that is not recognized now or has never been celebrated. What I find startling but commendable was the time and attention given to the battle for Chaguaramas as it turned out. The March for Chaguaramas on the 22nd April 1960 is a historic event which led, quote unquote, to capitulation by the colonial office and the United States government. In subsequent basis agreement, we know that the United States agreed to assist in the construction of the JFK Faculty of Art and Sciences in this campus, which today still exists. On behalf of the class of 6 of 1963, a class that still exists, all members and 3 of whom have gone on to graduate studies. I extend congratulations to Professor Jupiter on this book. He has been a source of pride and inspiration to the village of Grande Riviere, to the school at Grande Riviere, which bears a house by his name. And I wish him all the best for the future. In closing, I want to use a few lines from Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. That which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. My brother and friend, continue to be strong in will. Continue to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams, for your contribution. I will now invite Mr. Rupert Menz, retired Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, to make his contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Ekwe, Dean of Faculty of Engineering, Professor Jupiter, his wife, Clarice, and relatives, and family, actually. The media, special invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Jupiter called me and said, Rupert, I'd like you to make a few remarks, a few comments on a few chapters of this new book that we're launching today. He said maybe speak about 10 minutes or so. And my reply was, Andrew, 10 minutes is a long time speaking. Because those of you who know me know that I don't really like to speak that much. However, I could not resist the offer to be here today with Professor Jupiter. Jesmyn Ward, an American novelist, wrote, I believe there is power in words in asserting our existence, our experience, our lives through words. In this book, Professor Jupiter breathes life into that belief by sharing not only a glimpse of his 50 years of experience in the Trinidad and Tobago petroleum industry, but also his journey through life. While the book is a readable and informative biography, memoir, and as well a review of recent Trinidad and Tobago petroleum industry history, I shall be focusing on some salient aspects of the latter, that is on the development of the industry. First, chapter 4, the Trinidad and Tobago petroleum industry model. Good. The chapter gives a clear and concise account of the evolution of the Trinidad and Tobago petroleum industry, starting in the 1960s. It recounts major policy decisions affecting the Trinidad and Tobago economy, technical challenges faced by the economy in the monetization of its oil and natural gas resources, local content, national participation, and sustainability. This chapter could be of immense help to anyone, student or professional, who may wish to learn quickly about the history of this country's exciting petroleum industry. A development of major import in the industry was the formation of the Ministry of Petroleum and Mines that served the need to strengthen the institutional framework for managing petroleum-related matters. The ministry was formed in 1963. Prior to its existence was what is called the Mines Department, which was formed under the Mines Corings and Borings Ordinance in 1904. Now, a bit of revelation here. I was, in fact, an employee in the Mines Department, not in 1904. But my first job was what is called a research assistant. And I was there to participate in that exciting moment when we were moving from being a department, division, in fact, I think we were in agricultural division, to becoming part of the Ministry of Petroleum and Mines. And I think this book does a really excellent job in bringing forth the importance of the existence of that department. Now, the Mostofi Commission of Inquiry led to this really important step. I don't want to, I have to be, in reading the book, this book brought back so many memories to me that I had to keep reminding myself that I'm going to be speaking about Professor Jupiter and the industry, not about myself. But sometimes when memories are evoked, it's difficult not to insert some sort of personal experience as part of it. And I reasoned to myself, well, one reason that he probably asked me to speak was that he knew I was around for a long time. And I was a witness and participant in his journey, his 50-year journey in the industry. Now, you will find me speaking a bit about the Ministry of Petroleum and Mines, because this really was where the whole new emphasis, or the whole change in the administration of the industry began. The ministry was reduced, the structure was mainly three departments: legal, technical, and manpower. And the Petroleum Act 1969 and the Petroleum Regulations 1970 formed the legislative framework under which the ministry operated. It is noteworthy that, for those of you who do not know, the United Kingdom's petroleum law used the Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Act as a base document, as a reference document. So our legislation preceded that of England, because they were nowhere in they didn't have a big impact in the oil industry at that time. Of course, they overtook us, and their rise did not continue. Like in all extractive industries, and something that I think Trinidadians have to get accustomed to, that all extractive industries, they have a life, they start off, they grow. It's a crescendo, they grow. If they're like Saudi Arabia, then they last a long time. But in many areas, like in many fields in the US and other jurisdictions, oil companies disappear, oil fields disappear. Fortunately, they have been able to prolong the life of many of through new technological activities. Now, the taxation of the industry was important because this reflected the new outlook. You had the Petroleum Taxes Act in 1974, the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act in 74, the Income Tax in Aid of Industry Act, and the Fiscal Incentive Act of 1970. And what has to be noted here is that the increasing importance of natural gas in the development of the industry. First of all, in the 60s, gas was considered a nuisance. We had some gas produced by the existing oil fields. The oil fields used the gas for their own operations. One particular operation, Shell, they supplied gas to the companies or the villages that grew up around them. And Professor Jupiter does a very good job in recounting, what took place with these companies in those early years. Now, the industry is interesting. When I mention gas as a nuisance, I always remember that at one stage kerosene was a nuisance in the United States, and it used to be disposed of in the drains around the town. So that it's not strange that as the industry developed, we got uses for matters that were for substances that were no longer, that were not at one time of import. Now, the book covers a bit of the energy crisis. And this took place during the Yom Kippur War, where the Arab nations were having this battle with Israel and so on. And this chapter, if you read it, look at the chapter carefully, you'll see a lot of useful graphs and charts that would help you, that explain, and that would also help you to understand the approach that government was encouraged to take following the increase in oil and gas prices that accompanied the war. The one major effect of the war was the windfall profits enjoyed by the oil companies, and the thinking there was that the companies didn't do anything to deserve any, this extra income that from which they were benefiting. And some people say the government didn't do anything extra either. So, but the government is a government, right? The crisis of this energy crisis drove technological innovation towards monetizing our gas reserves. that led eventually to the promotion of natural gas-based industrial development by the government. In the 1970s to the 1990s, natural gas utilization moved beyond ammonia production and electricity generation. It had to be taken seriously. Now, significant deposits of natural gas were discovered of the East Coast Marine area by a company called Pan American. And those resources just lay there. They weren't reserves at the time because there was no use for them. But government was forced to look at monetizing these resources. Plans were established in the 70s, during the 70s to the 90s at Point Lisas. And another speaker will be speaking more about that, telling more about that. Now, part of the government's recognition of the new role that gas was to play was the incorporation of 3 companies, and whose objective was, of course, to monetize these resources. Now, Trintoc was formed. This was formed from Shell assets. The NGC is formed to responsible for the sale of gas, and the NEC. Now, the industry prior to the Mustafi Commission, really was run for the benefit, the main benefit of the foreign investors. And I think that the Petroleum Act really tried to right this wrong. In hindsight, it's always easy to say what should have been done, but one has to take into account the circumstances that prevail under any when decisions are made. Boy, if we all had that ability to see what is coming in the future, our lives would be so different today. The point is, one has to be aware of what is taking place and make the best decision that you could with the information that you have at the time. You can't ask for any more than that. Chapter 5 of the book deals with the mechanism for development. And this chapter provides excellent coverage of the operation of the Ministry of Energy. And you'd find me, but not only I'm following the lead of the book, emphasizing a lot, dealing a lot with the Ministry of Petroleum and Mines. That is a ministry that is so important to the economic well-being of this country. I refer to the momentous change that the findings of the Mustafi Commission promulgated in Trinidad and Tobago oil industry. The Ministry of Petroleum and Mines, whatever name it was called later, was established as a governmental agency with responsibility for policy formulation, planning, and management of the sector. And then the evolution of the ministry is interesting. First, about in 1904, as I said, we had the mines department. In 1948, it was renamed the Petroleum Department. In 1963, the staff of the mine department was absorbed in the ministry, and I was part of that absorption, what's going to call it. But let me make it clear, I was not an engineer or anything in the ministry. Huh? It was just my second job after leaving high school. And one of the things that the ministry did for me was it helped to focus my mind on petroleum, because prior to that I was interested in agriculture. And I was so taken aback by the operation of this ministry that I fell into it. The range of responsibilities covered by the ministry is extensive and diverse and includes the following: policy regarding exploration and production, petroleum utilization, long-term planning, facilitation of the use of non-renewables. Of course, the ministry is the key to the formulation of suitable legislation to enable government's policies. The chapter 5, gives an excellent background on an excellent insight into the role of legislation and how that enables government's policies. I go a little bit here into, not much, a little bit into the organization of the ministry, and I'll tell you why in it. First, the ministry is organized along really 9 main divisions. Energy research and planning, which deals with local and content and renewable energy. Commercial evaluation, so deal with bid rounds and negotiation. Contract management, they deal with exploration and production incentives. Production sharing contracts. The legal division, legislation of contracts, agreements, and other legal issues. Downstream production management, which administers the Production Levy and Subsidy Act. Petroleum operations, approval of upstream and downstream activities. Reservoir management, LNG and gas exports. The minerals division. And the reason I mention all these divisions is that I hope students would note the range and diversity of the job possibilities covered by the Ministry of Energy. I know in reading the history of the industry, one student would question, well, is there a future for me in this industry? Well, I already mentioned the general profile of the industry. But this chapter reminds me of the thought I had, when I graduated high school in the 60s. Who am I kidding? In 1960. The first question I had to ask myself was, will I get a job? And this is a question I noticed when in dealing with students throughout the years, engineering students and so on. Whenever we had these career seminars, the first question they'd ask me, Mr. Menz, when I graduate, will there be still a petroleum industry? And I think it's a question that's always on the mind of a graduate from or someone working in an extractive industry. The point is that the ingenuity of the scientists and engineers is such that it prolonged, the life of the industry is prolonged. However, Dr. Jupiter's book said this, one has to look at the challenges now facing the industry. In addition to longevity, there is, some people think there's a threat caused by climate change, which is trying to encourage people to use less oil and gas. The enigma is that although they're speaking about using less oil and gas, you find more oil and gas is being discovered. More exploration is being carried out. So I think students have to be really flexible. First of all, you get training as an engineer or as a financial expert and so on. And that doesn't mean you have to be confined to those areas. The life of the industry is more than 100 years old. And I dare not say it will be around for another 100 years. But I am only speaking from the standpoint of the knowledge that I have now. Okay? So one has to be really excited and read carefully this chapter to see the great influences that the petroleum industry has had on making Trinidad and Tobago what it is today. Now, the government continues to attract investors in oil and gas. And as I said, although some people are saying, well, woe is me, the industry is about to end, the point is that one has to keep exploring. And investors are invited through really about 5 mechanisms in the industry, and these 5 are covered in Chapter 5. That is E&P exploration and production licenses, production sharing contracts, lease operatorships, farm outs, service contracts. These are all different legal mechanisms to encourage investors to explore in Trinidad and Tobago. Some have advantages over others. The E&P licenses have advantages over the certain advantages. Production sharing contracts have other advantages. And I think what I'd like to point out is one of the main advantages of the production sharing contracts was that the government had a little more say into the operations. They had a greater insight into what was taking place in the oil companies. Now, Dr. Jupiter pays tribute to the people with whom he worked in the sector and the teams that he led. He mentions quite a few people by name who readers of the book could surely recognize. Among them, stalwarts like Trevor Bupsing, and others of that stature. Dr. Jupiter pays tribute to the people with whom he worked in the sector and the team that he led, their dedication to ensuring that maximum value is extracted from the industry to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'd like to leave it at that and just briefly cover the chapter 12 that deals with leadership and the next generation. Now, it is clear in this chapter that Professor Jupiter has very strong views on the subject of leadership. He recalls the names of several persons who influenced his own thinking and understanding of leadership, and recognizes the role they played in the development of the country's energy sector. He shares certain insights in leadership. I'd briefly like to cover a few of them. One, he speaks of the fact that leadership is measured by what you leave behind, how you're remembered. He looks at the difference between leadership and management. And I have to confess, Dr. Jupiter, I have a real struggle, distinguishing between leadership and management sometimes. And you have given a very clear ideas on what you perceive as the differences. Generally speaking, you think leadership dealing more with the future, the direction in which the organization is going, whereas management is dealing with the day-to-day operations. Because in real life, I don't know if you have that very clear-cut decisions. I feel some managers have to exhibit some kind of leadership too. And for someone from the Ministry of Energy, or anyone working in a government ministry, it's a very important thing to look at, because I think the minister would tell you, I am the leader of this organization, right? And you're the permanent secretary. You are just a manager. And good ministers usually live up to that credo too. And that if anything goes wrong outside the ministry, they take the blame. And if anything goes wrong inside the ministry, you take the blame, which is fair enough if you want to take a stance like that, The chapter speaks of having a shared vision to ensure the success of the organization. One important thing is you need to know how to deal with failure. And why not? We are not these perfect beings that everything we do will be, without flaws. And it shows how one has to get to move, to be a leader. One has to move beyond that. You can't be bogged down by failure. And I mean to inject a personal credo that I had during my operations was that I always convinced myself when something was going wrong and things were really bad, I always said, next month this time, so I'll be thinking of something else. That will no longer be the important thing that's taking my attention. So that Dr. Jupiter's insight into how you deal with failure and so on is important. And I think young students especially should have a look at this chapter, because it would help guide them in their future endeavors. Dr. Jupiter said timing is important when it comes to change. Leadership is concerned with the long haul. The little things matter. All right? You go into the office and you speak to the clerk comes up to you, you give that clerk your time. You don't only take the time to deal with the higher-ups in the organization, because everybody contributes. And I know sometimes, I remember sometimes people come and say, Mr. Menz, I told you good morning and you didn't answer me. And banteringly, I'd say, sometimes the head is so hot, people talking to you and you don't hear them. It's not that I intended to diss you or anything like that. But it's important that people see in an organization, they have this feeling that they can approach the bosses. Okay? And for not least, I would like to mention Dr. Jupiter's insight into and his faith in God. One cannot speak about Andrew Jupiter or anything he does without recognizing his abiding faith in his Creator. And I admire him for this, and I thank him for all the contributions he has made to the oil industry. That's it. I hope I haven't kept you too long, but it's a difficult chapter. Okay.
So Mr. Menz, in his contribution, mentioned about petroleum engineering and employment. I would like to say that all our graduates in petroleum engineering at the UWI are employed at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Menz, for your contribution. I would now like to invite Dr. Vernon Paltu, President of National Energy, to make his contribution.
Thank you, Professor Hussein. And good evening, Professor Jupiter, Mrs. Jupiter, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Certainly a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I must say, this is a journey that started a very long time ago. To be exact, September 2004 was the date that I would have met Professor Jupiter, or back then, how we fondly call him, Mr. Jupiter, September 2004. And I remember it clearly. It was actually on a flight to Denmark to visit Haldo Topsoe, which is, as you all know, leading ammonia producer globally. And we were under instruction from Professor Julian to meet with Dr. Topsoe. And we had the opportunity to sit on that flight to London, back and forth. So that was in September 2004. And by December 2004, I was working for Mr. Jupiter, to make a long story short. Okay. So we started at the department, business development department at National Energy back in 2004. That would have been, I see Sheila is here. Sheila, Professor Jupiter, and myself would have been the beginning of that business development department. So since then, it has been quite a journey of learning, a journey of mentorship. And it, has taught me to be the person that I am in no small way. And I'm very thankful for that. So this evening, I have the privilege of going through chapters 6, 7, and 8. And I will try to be as concise as possible in terms of how we approach this. So let me start by just reading from chapter 6, the beginning of chapter 6. I have some very important quotes in all of these chapters. So I'll start from chapter 6. On the first page of chapter 6, it says, NGC was incorporated by the government in August 1975 to be the designated agency of the government for the purpose of purchasing and selling natural gas in the country to industrial and commercial users. The company was tasked with entering into contracts with Trinidad related to the sale of gas to the Trinidad plant and Amoco regarding the purchase of gas from Amoco. Cabinet decided that a separate company would be formed for this purpose, since it was felt that the ministry would not possess the flexibility required to operate effectively in a commercial space. I dare say that is probably one of the most important decisions in the history of this country, and I'm sure Mr. Lukin would agree with me there, right? But Professor Jupiter, I think that was one of the important turning points in the history of Trinidad and Tobago from, the energy sector. But what is, so telling is by the end of chapter 6, we get to the point where, and I quote again, the global energy business is changing, with many countries committing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to produce energy from renewable sources. Trinidad and Tobago has confirmed its intention to reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions by 15% by 2030. The plan is to achieve this target from 3 sectors: power generation, transport, and industrial. With greater transparency and increased public education and communication, government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago can establish linkages between communities, the industrial and commercial sectors, and civil society. With heightened awareness and intensified collaboration, together we will usher the next era of Trinidad and Tobago's energy industry. I want to say that is also a very important turning point for the country. And from our perspective at National Energy and by extension NGC, we are very much aligned to that philosophy in terms of understanding the role that the country plays and the state plays in transitioning, towards a lower carbon future. As Mr. Menz alluded a short while ago, there's different views, but in terms of sustainability, we firmly believe that is where we have to go in terms of ensuring a future for Trinidad and Tobago. And the statement about linking communities and education, we feel strongly where that is concerned. So a lot of our effort is geared towards education from primary school students all the way to university. We have programs interacting and teaching first-year students, second-year students, and we are interacting with the universities because we feel education is one of the critical pillars in terms of changing the mindset and the culture of the country, as well as community engagement, as stated in the book. We are working with all our fence-line communities to do training, education in renewable energy as we speak right now. There are various programs in practice. So that will take care of chapter 6. Let me move on to chapter 7 now. And chapter 7, which is entitled South-South Cooperation and Other Internationalization Strategies. And I quote again, Trinidad and Tobago, a country of 1.4 million citizens, has long been punching above its weight in the global energy industry. However, given the current state of natural gas reserves, as well as the global shift towards lower carbon fuels, we must implement strategies for growth beyond our borders. But what do we have to offer? Firstly, Trinidad and Tobago can leverage its long and successful history in petroleum business. We have a track record of effective monetization of natural gas through our policies and contract negotiations. The NGC Group has also been successful in securing benefit for the state at all points along the natural gas value chain. Our ability to train and deploy effective managers, engineers, operators in the oil and gas business is undoubtable. This is demonstrated by the fact that Trinidad and Tobago nationals can be found at work in every oil and gas producing region in the globe. On every continent where there's an oil rig, you can be sure to find a Trinbagonian. The next leading producers, Guyana and Suriname, are located less than 700 kilometers away from our shores. These countries have expressed their intention to optimize value from their resources to develop their economies. Trinidad and Tobago can critically support these emerging provinces in the areas of energy services, technical training, plant construction and operation, pipeline construction and maintenance, and infrastructure planning and development. So again, I was with Professor Jupiter in the inception of these things, when these things had its foundation blocks laid, the African Initiative Professor, CARICOM Energy Policy, all of those things we worked together, and Sheila would know about that as well, 100 years of oil. We worked on all of those projects, night and day sometimes. And it's good to see that we have results today, because today our country through NGC is present in terms of doing work in Africa and Ghana. NGC has recently completed a project. We are actively involved in Suriname and Guyana towards developing commercial projects, things that will materialize at a government level very soon. Even from the perspective of North America, one of the subsidiaries, Phoenix Park, has operations in North America at this point in time. So we have used that blueprint, Professor, and have realized what the work was that we were doing back then. It is coming to fruition as we speak. So well done again. And finally, in chapter 8, I quote again, I joined the National Energy Corporation in 2004. Having served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries from 1998 to 2004, I possess in-depth knowledge of the energy industry from policy making and a regulatory perspective. NEC had played an integral role in building the gas-based petrochemical industry in the 1980s before being subsumed into NGC. I felt the newly reoperationalized NEC had an important contribution to make in delivering the fourth generation of gas-based development. Focus has shifted in the new millennium to extracting additional benefit from the natural gas value chain by going further downstream. NEC represented a new opportunity for me to serve and contribute in the execution side of the industry. And moving on to the end of that chapter, it's quite an interesting chapter with all the work we would have done at National Energy. It goes on to say, and I quote again, I officially retired as president of NEC on 30th of June 2012. As I had come to NEC directly from MEEI, the management and staff of NEC graciously hosted a wonderful valedictory function for me, which incorporated colleagues and friends from the public service as well as industry. The event team innings well played, 60 not out, captured my lifelong passions for energy and cricket. Every aspect of the program was thoughtfully planned. From the honor guard that greeted my family at the entrance to the master of ceremonies, speakers, videos, and musical selections, I was moved in every detail. So today, if I calculate correctly, we had 70 not out, if I'm not mistaken, right? And innings is still going very strong and very, very, very good. I think this, as Amin, we would know, is a culmination of your life work, Professor Jupiter, and it's well done. I have been honored to be part of this journey. It is, something that I will treasure for a very long time. On a personal note, I want to close by saying that this is not included in this book, but I think it was 13 years ago, actually, on September 23rd, 2009. That is, tomorrow will be the anniversary. Professor Jupiter actually introduced me to my wife, right? So there's no repayment for that, right? And that will probably have to be in my book down the road sometime. So thank you so much, Professor Jupiter, for your lifelong journey in learning. And, if I read this entire book, my favorite chapter is chapter 12, where you talk about leadership, because a lot of who I am is based on your leadership style and your leadership skills. And I could say one of the most important lessons I've learned from you is that we always look at how to make things happen. We never say why it can be done. Say, let us see how it can be done. So thank you, and well done, Professor Jupiter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vernon Paltu. And I will now invite Mr. Fitzroy Harewood, President of Point Lisas Nitrogen Limited, to make his contribution.
Professor Jupiter, Dr. Clarice Macmillan Jupiter, two people I hold very dear. We'll talk about why in a bit, but the biggest reasons are they're from Point Fortin, and they went to Point Fortin College, right? Which is my alma mater and their alma mater. To your daughter as well, welcome. To the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, former government ministers, government officials, specially invited guests, my fellow downstream leaders who are here with me today, I trust you will support me. Members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. So let me begin by saying that you should approach my presentation with some trepidation, because Leroy Williams said that Andrew called him and said, you have to talk for 5 minutes. And you know how long he went. And then Rupert Menz said that Andrew told him to talk for 10 minutes. When Andrew called me, he said, I want to talk for about 15 minutes. So I think we have a real trouble here today. Nonetheless, let me just say that I've been asked to talk on two chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the National Oil Company, which is Petrotrin. I suppose there's an obvious reason I'm asked to talk on that. As a former president of Petrotrin, at a time when Andrew Jupiter was the chairman of the board, and indeed the board that hired me as president. So there's a very obvious reason. Notwithstanding, whenever I talk about that, I recall Petrotrin was a challenging period, right? And I remember my name being called in the Senate by the leader of government of the opposition at the time in the Senate, the great and effervescent Wade Mark. And he said, who is this Fitzroy Harewood? We don't know who he is. And maybe he came from the planet Jupiter. So I suppose, if indeed I came from the planet Jupiter, it's quite natural that I will talk about Petrotrin today, right? But chapter 2 is a chapter that is entitled Growing Up in the Town That Oil Built, Point Fortin, in case you weren't sure where that town is. And I am also from Point Fortin. I also claim two parts of the South as my home. One is Guapo, Parilan's Guapo, where I was born, and we lived for the first 10, 11 years of my life, which is an oil town by any stretch of the imagination. And then Point Fortin, where we went in 75. I lived in Mahaika. So let's talk about chapter 2. Now, Andrew, and I saw the PS of the Ministry of Energy, Penelope Beckles-Niles, here with us, Bradshaw Niles. And she, I saw a quote that I didn't see in the program, but there was a quote that came up on the screen earlier before you came, Penny. And it talked about your comments on the book, which I thought was spot on. Because it said that Andrew attempted to talk about the history of the oil industry, and it is interwoven with his own personal experience. And I want to challenge the readers, because I won't give you excerpts from the book. I don't have anything against my partner, Vernon, but I won't read anything from the book. But I want you to go and read the book, because you would be challenged to figure out whether or not he's really talking about his life, or whether he's talking about the life of the oil industry as far back as the 18 something to now, right? I think that is really marvelous, the way he's been able to skillfully do that. He's done a very good job at interweaving those two themes, if you will. And it makes for interesting reading, because at times you are getting an insight into the man and his life. And then more often than not, which I think is powerful for young students, you get an insight into the growth of the energy industry. Growing up in Point Fortin, I was acutely aware, of course at a much later age than he would have grown up in Point Fortin. I was born in the 60s, which I think is when he went to secondary school. I would have understood, Ronald, you were in Point Fortin also, you know, I would have understood the stratification that came from Clifton Hill to Mahaika to Tiche, which was indicative of senior management, supervisory management, not even supervisory leadership, not even management and junior staff, and then daily paid workers, Tiche, right? And that stigma, by the time we were growing up in the 70s and the 80s, had gone to some extent, and everybody knew everybody, but it was very clear where the origins are. Andrew does a very good job of tracing the growth of the oil refinery in Point Fortin under UBOT, which was then a partner with Shell, and eventually became the Shell refinery. And he also talks a lot about how after the 1937 riots, and he gives good credence to people like Butler and Adrian Cola Virenzi, He then talks about how after the Moen Commission, the government and the company in particular, Shell, would have done a lot to try to encourage the development of the locals to take jobs in the oil industry, in the refinery in particular, and that they would encourage that development by offering scholarships. So there are two things about that. One is that my father entered the apprenticeship program that came from that in 1942 as a 15-year-old boy out of post-primary school, and worked for the next 45 years until he was 60 in the same oil refinery. So I have that in my DNA. And so when I read his account, it resonated with me. It was really a moment to understand that is, because you know, in those young days growing up in South, with modest means, no big TV and Nintendo, your bedside line was your father's stories. And when he gave me his repeated stories, it all sounded fancy. And sometimes you wonder if Daddy's perspective was right. But Andrew's book said that he was very right, and that he was one of those who benefited from the apprenticeship program that incorporated a lot of young people in Point Fortin. And I say that because today the country is grappling with technical vocational education and trying to understand how to make that stick. And in those days, that was well executed, to the point that almost in every household in Point Fortin, it was normal to go behind the house and see a workbench, to see a vice grip, to see some files and tools, and to see the men who had worked in the refinery also being very good handymen in their home and being able to do a lot of things. So that was the first point. The other point is to note that Andrew is very clear in documenting that some of the early pioneers of this university, Dean, some of them who were stalwarts in the engineering faculty, started their careers in the Point Fortin refinery. That included people like Professor Ken Julian, Professor Max Richards. Again, I was inundated with those stories by my father. And as I grew to be a young man and came to this university, and I saw Professor Julian at play, I said, I wonder if Daddy mixed it up when Julian was never really there, but Andrew has solidified it, right? Professor Julian worked in the refinery, Norbert Masso, Casabon, among many others, as young student engineers. And then he went on to talk about one that is very near and dear to me, Kita Wong, who was the first president of Petrotran. So he talks about and also from Point Fortin. So he talks about how the investment in young people to help them become enamored with engineering and science and petroleum paid dividends to the industry later on. The tongue that oil built. So that Point Fortin nurtured, if you will, strong engineering skills. So when the journalists, and I see my friend Tony Fraser here, when the journalists paint Point Fortin as only arts and culture, wine and jam, those of us who come from Point Fortin, we feel pained over that. Because we understand that Point Fortin was the birthplace of some solid engineering and strong scientific growth in this country. And we feel that that part of it is never realized. Thank you, Andrew, for recognizing that in Point Fortin. And then he goes on to talk a lot about the troubles that the oil industry faced in the 60s. Because by the time he was hired in 1971 as a young lab assistant, there was a huge retrenchment exercise that took place. And he actually put the number in the book, 950 people were retrenched and sent home, severed, if you will. And that he was really the new wave of employees that took place after that, for the short period, leading up to 1974, when eventually Trinidad could be formed. It's interesting to note that one of the great characteristics of this oil industry, oil and gas industry of which we are part, its ability to influence its fence line. And there is no greater example of fence line influence than Point Fortin, the tongue that oil built. Because the Mahaica Oval, the area crime that we now see today was not apparent in those days, because everybody was involved in the activities, in the facilities from the tongue that oil built. So thank you for that, Andrew. He then concludes the chapter by talking about Shell leaving in 74 and positing an argument about whether the decision to form Trintoc was based on economics, or it was based on a social agenda, if you will, to make sure that people were not put on the streets. Well, I suppose later on he would talk about that, because he jumps from that to Petrotrin. But I worked as a young engineer in Trintoc, and I can tell you that when I joined in the 80s, there was a lot of admiration for people like Walton James and Kita Wong and Claude Leong, who were locals who were running the industry, who were in the refinery, and to whom, as young engineers, we felt a lot of respect, not just for their position, but for their ability. So that's chapter 2. In chapter 9, he goes into Petrotrin. And yeah, well, that's an interesting one, right? So he himself says in the book that it was a very challenging time. As a matter of fact, I think he says it may have been his most difficult period in his professional career. 2015 to 2017, which is when he eventually demitted office. And then I left in 2018, February. So that's interesting, because it was a challenging time. And I want to say that Andrew Jupiter as a leader, and I want to just re-emphasize so many things that Vernon said. Andrew Jupiter as a leader is the kind of chairman you want if you're placed in an executive leadership position, because Andrew understands governance. And I could distinctly remember him saying, because his office was just down a door from where I sat as president, and I could distinctly hear as the trek came into his office, because many people came as he was appointed chairman, and everybody had a request, some of them very personal, not many of them were very trying to help the company, more about themselves. But as they came, I could hear him distinctly say, that is not for the chairman, that's for the president. I didn't do it necessarily in a bad way, to say, well, let the president deal with that. He really understood governance. And he understood, even at the board level, there were some things they would have to make decisions on, and there were things that the executive will have to deal with. And I really commend him for that. And the team then, which was a really commendable team to work with and to be challenged. I talked to some of the VPs who were with me at Petrotrin, and 2 of them at least are here today. And we all agreed that Jupiter challenged us, because he wasn't just about the norm. You know, Henry Kissinger recently wrote a book at 90-something years, Rupert Mentz, about leadership. And in one of his chapters, he talked about the balance between the individual and the environment and able to shape the future and history. And he talks about the individual being able to look past their present circumstances and to chart a future forward. The board under Andrew Jupiter was able to look past the challenges, and there's a subtitle in the chapter where he talks about managing, and Andrew, as you know, is a God-fearing man. So I think Psalms chapter 23, the Lord's Psalm, was always in his mind. He entitled that chapter, Managing in the Shadow of Debt. Not debt, right? Debt. Because you know, Petrotrin in those days, Frank, was heavily indebted. And it was a real challenge to run the company with that kind of debt hanging over the heads of the organization. But we nevertheless charted the path. Some will argue that he didn't go far enough on the Petrotrin chapter. If you open the book and you jump to Petrotrin, you're looking for a mark that get boss, it didn't get boss. He basically followed the very conservative part. He talked about what we did. He talked about a strategic plan that we would challenge to develop as an executive. And in that strategic plan, we had aligned around 5 pillars, which were, of course, building a beyond compliance safety culture, because we understood that safety was critical, and he bought into that very easily. We talked about assurance around the integrity of the assets, which no reason to convince you of that. That was a big issue with all the oil spills and the issues around the refinery. And then we talked about developing a learning organization, talked about deploying technology, and then ensuring we had a sustainable business model. It was a strategic plan that we worked hard on, put a lot of effort behind. And when it was first presented, Andrew had some questions and some concerns, which we went back and went through a few iterations, and eventually we got a document that we thought was a feasible solution going forward. We presented to the board approved it, and then they in turn submitted it for approval. And in his book, he'll talk about what happened thereafter. I want to send you back into the book. You thought I would talk about that. I'll let him see that, right? So all in all, he gives a pretty good account of his role in Petrotrin and his role. And by the way, he is, again, I want to say it's a really skillful approach, because he not only talks about the sequence of events with Petrotrin, which of course everybody will feel is the juicy part you need to get to, but he lets us into his own thoughts and his own mind. In particular, he begins by talking about visiting Marabella, which is another tongue, Ken Ferguson, that came out of the oil industry. He talks about going into Marabella in December of 2018 and feeling a sense of loss as he spoke to the business people who felt that with the refinery closure, they were now suffering serious economic downturn. That's just the history. So he lets us into his thoughts. He lets us into the fact that he had the unique benefit of serving on Petrotrin boards at least 3 times. And this was his 3rd incarnation. And that he would have also been involved in the incarnation that would have taken a business decision to shut down the Point Fortin refinery at a time when the Point Pierre refinery was running. So again, you can gather your thoughts around that and understand what's going on. All in all, Andrew Jupiter is again, I use the word some penny. She called the book a jewel, but I think Andrew is a jewel. I think he's somebody that we should cherish. He is reflective of a time in Trinidad that I hope still exists, where seniors, and a lot of them are here today, in the energy industry were seen as champions of Trinidad's interests, champions of what is best for this country, and who were not afraid to stand toe-to-toe with the multinationals and didn't feel intimidated by them, but felt to be their equals. And I think if we could just transcend that confidence to our young engineers today and our young practitioners, that they can punch above their weight and that they are no different to professionals in other parts of the world, then I think we would have done our duty in terms of creating a great legacy. Today, there are a group of locals who are running enterprise in the energy industry in Trinidad that I feel very proud to be a part of. And I think we have captured the legacy, and we perform our duty in salute of people like Andrew Jupiter for the work that they have done. Thank you, Andrew, and all the best to you.
For that contribution. Anytime I hear Point Fortin, I also remember Silver Harp Steel Orchestra. I will now call on Dr. David Alexander, Associate Professor and Head of Department at University of Trinidad and Tobago, to make his contribution.
Professor Jupiter, I know he's not here, he just stepped out. Dr. Jupiter, specially invited guests, all protocols observed. 4 speakers went before me, and I hope you all realize that the time kept increasing as to which the speaker got. So the first one 5, second 7, third 10, fourth 15, and I was given 45 minutes to speak, right? But Professor Jupiter, since a lot of my time has been encroached upon, I will only speak for 5 minutes, highlighting some of the key points that I thought existed in chapter 10 and 11. So chapter 10 basically is based on the inevitable energy transition, and chapter 11 is based on linking academia to industry. Now, before I get into what these chapters are about, I would simply say, having conversations with Professor Jupiter around 2017, 2018, his tone was a true oil man. You would never hear any conversations, or very little conversations, about energy transition. So when I read chapter 10, I was so amazed at the clarity in which he could point to the energy transition and where things should go. So it means that his learning curve has been very steep over the past 4 years, to a point where he is able to translate or move away from oil into energy transition. So in chapter 10, as he himself said, by its very nature, energy is always changing from one form to the other. And after 50 years, he believes that now is the right time to set aside some of the strategies and mechanisms that worked in the past to reimagine and reinvent the country's energy strategy to meet the demands of an evolving local and international energy ecosystem. So some of the questions that will come to your mind are, how do we reimagine and reinvent the country's energy strategy? What is the energy transition, and why has it become such a pressing issue in recent years? What is zero carbon? Why is it so important? These questions are answered in Professor Jupiter's book. He also stated that 3 sectors have been identified for reduction of emissions: power generation, transportation, and industrial. And he said there were no specific strategy for transitioning the energy sector to net zero, and that has yet to be provided. So he also stated that it is his firm belief that Trinidad and Tobago has to undergo a just and effective energy transition, and a clear policy with a definite plan is required at this juncture. He also suggested 2060 be adopted as the official target year for achieving net zero conditions in Trinidad and Tobago. When I read that sentence, I called Professor Jupiter on the phone, and I said, why 2060? Right? But in his book, he gives the reasons why he thinks it's 2060 and not 2050. He also mentioned an electricity transition program. What is this electricity transformation program about? In his book, he had a team called Focus Industries for the Future. And under this theme, he spoke about areas such as green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol, carbon capture, utilization and storage, green synthetic fuels. And in that section, he made another key point stating that interim strategies for the next 5 years would be critical for creating an environment that catalyzes and incentivizes a just energy transition. What should this interim strategy be? All these questions that I've just asked again are answered in Professor Jupiter's book. Now, the second chapter, linking academia to industry, painted a picture that would leave all graduates and potential students excited to be involved in the energy sector. There were 4 key submissions which included linking academia to industry through projects and knowledge transfer, accessing funding, establishing linkages home and abroad, and commercializing petroleum studies unit services. He stated in that book he believed that the local energy industry has not developed its full potential in the areas of research and development. Therefore, his main objective was to leverage his new role at UWI to strengthen the relationship between industry and academia. So what did he do? How was he able to link academia to industry through projects and knowledge transfer? How did he access funding and what projects were developed and executed? What linkages were developed home and abroad? What are some of the ways to commercialize petroleum studies unit services? I'll give you a small preview as to 2 of the things that he did linking home and abroad. The first one is when he signed the MOU between the University of Texas, and he drove that relationship between UWI and UTT and the University of Texas. And the second one is an MOU between UWI and UTT, and that relationship is really to collaborate on delivering courses, working on special projects, developing a carbon storage atlas, and that carbon storage atlas is being funded by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, BP, and Shell. And these relationships also allowed him to present at COP24, COP25, and later this year at COP27. But in the book, it will tell us what does these agreements do? Who are the key players? Again, if you read Professor Jupiter's book, you will get all the answers to these questions. In closing, I will read directly from the last paragraph of his book with a subtitle, Small Nation, Big Impact. And he said, as I reflect over the last 50 years, I am thankful for the productive working relationships and genuine friendships that have enriched my career. I have sincerely enjoyed every stage of the journey, including the peaks and troughs. The opportunity to impart my knowledge and experience to the next generation of energy sector leaders has truly been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Trinidad and Tobago did not allow its small size to limit its reach in the global energy business. His hope for the upcoming energy professionals is that they would build on the foundation of our past to lead Trinidad and Tobago boldly into the green energy future. So from my experience from working with Professor Jupiter, I think that the platform is well laid for energy and the energy transition. And we are happy that you are around, Professor Jupiter, to see the fruits of your labor. And the records in this book will leave a long-lasting legacy for others to follow. And to everyone here this afternoon, I say, read the book.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Alexander, for that contribution. I would like to share some of Professor Jupiter's invaluable contributions, in particular to the Department of Chemical Engineering taken from chapter 11. He joined the UWI in August 2013 as Distinguished Fellow and Coordinator of the Petroleum Studies Unit and holder of the MHTL Chair in Petroleum Engineering. And one may ask, why? The confidence of Professor Jupiter expressed by the energy industries and the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries based on his wealth of knowledge, experience, and relationships with all stakeholders as the right person to bridge academia and industry. I should also mention that the MHTL Chair was renamed in 2019 the MHTL Dennis Patrick Chair. Soon afterwards, he reintroduced the MSc in Petroleum Engineering and Management and the Graduate Diploma in Petroleum Engineering and Management programs at the request of industry. On May 1st, 2018, he was appointed by the UWI as Professor of Practice with attachment to the Faculty of Engineering. He was very instrumental in having our MSc Petroleum Engineering program being delivered as a self-financing program from August 2019 at the University of Guyana. His outreach activities and collaboration established with industry and external universities such as Pennsylvania State University, University of Texas, Austin, University of Calgary, and the UTT in the area of oil and gas exploration and production, gas hydrates, carbon dioxide utilization and sequestration, and renewable energy. His contribution and commitment to teaching, research, outreach activities, and his drive towards commercialization of the Petroleum Studies Unit and the Department of Chemical Engineering. His profound ability to raise over $45 million in 9 years for the operation of the Petroleum Studies Unit and for equipment, teaching, research, and scholarships for students. Funding came from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries and also the energy industries. His strength was bringing in money and establishing relationships. I am sure that Dr. David Alexander from UTT will agree that there is nothing more a head of department can ask for. I will now invite Professor Andrew Jupiter, author of Red, White, and Black Gold, a 50-year journey in the Trinidad and Tobago energy industries, to give his remarks.
Thank you very much. Master of Ceremonies, Professor Dr. Rafi Hussein, my charming wife, Dr. Clarice Jupiter, former ministers of government, permanent secretaries, former permanent secretaries, Dean of Engineering of the faculty, Professor Dr. Edwin Ekwe, deputy deans, heads of department, captains of industry, colleagues, specially invited guests, media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you, Dean, for your welcoming remarks and approving the use of Lecture Theatre 1 for my book launch. I'm happy about that because some graduates of engineering have not been in here for 30, 40 years, and they are here today. And I hope the presence here will allow them to continue to make a contribution to the engineering and also, definitely, to the University of the West Indies. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Many thanks for accepting my invitation to the launch of Red, White, and Black Gold, a 50-year journey in the Trinidad and Tobago energy industry. My journey in the energy sector reflects the great teams that Almighty God had assembled for me. Commencing with my family, my father, and I heard my brother David mention that, Mr. James Nori, my mother, Maud Jupiter, I call her Mrs. Kissinger. And I have to talk personally why I call her Mrs. Kissinger. my stepfather, Augustine Ned, and stepmother, Miss Evelyn Noe, all of whom are sadly deceased. My brother David is here, my sister, my members of the extended family, thank you for coming. Family is priority after God. Family is priority after God. I'm even more blessed today as I have dedicated this book to my charming and faithful wife, Dr. Clarice Ruth Judith Macmillan Jupiter. 44 years of my journey, of my 50 years journey, I have been with Mrs. Dr. Clarice Ruth Judith Macmillan Jupiter. Rupert, all the corrections you started when I started to work, after a while I gave it to her. But when she met you in a meeting, she said, I understand now why Rupert used to correct you. But I should say something. This union has brought 4 sons, Kevin, Zwade, Jason, and Robert, and 1 daughter, Leanne, who found you and invited you. I'm seeing some faces here that I have not seen for decades. Thank you for coming. Great work, my beloved daughter. Great work. Thank you very much for doing the work. I was told I must remember my 5 grandchildren, and I'll call them by name. Cayenne, Kevin Andre, Alexander, William, and Maria. But before I thank the various teams and all, let me take this opportunity to thank the following persons who read and endorsed the book. Dr. Kermit Waljon, he did the foreword. And when you read the book, you read what he has said. He was the first SP president in Trinidad and Tobago. Am I correct, Rupert? First SP in Trinidad and Tobago. Wendell Motley, I saw him here today. This is former minister, thank you very much, of finance. Kevin Ramnarine, another minister. I say I have to hear from the ministers, former minister of energy. 1 finance, 1 energy. And you read what they have said. Penelope Bradshaw Niles, and I understand she's here. Thank you for coming. P.S. Permanent Secretary, oh, you are here very much. Thank you. I'm very pleased that you are able to, I understand you are, don't let me tell you your business. You ought to be at an important conference later this week, and you are here. I'm very, very pleased that you are here. Frank Lookin, former president of National Gas Company, an advisor to many energy ministers. I was saying something before. Is this in the book? You have to read it to find out. I have many stories to tell in my 50-year journey. Let me give you one at this time of a Frank. One Carnival Saturday, Frank was president of the National Gas Company, and I was permanent secretary of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. We were summoned to the Prime Minister's residence. I assure you, it was not an invitation to a carnival fete. I remembered Frank ought to be in Miami that weekend. He ought to have been, and he canceled it. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. At the end of the meeting, we jumped in our cars and we drove around the savannah and we parked our cars. We got out of our cars and simultaneously we said, what just happened there? What just happened there? We did not know. But what we knew as professionals, we were dedicated to serving the people of Trinidad and Tobago, serving the red, white, and black. And so we did. Black gold refers to petroleum. Frank, what a day that was. What a day. We understood the meeting continued in the evening, but without the 2 technocrats. Gregory Maguire, also principal consultant, also made comments. Thank you very much. Professor Rafi Hossain, you heard his view on me. I never knew I was a minister of finance, but it seemed to me when I heard the $43 million, I started asking, probably I should move in that area. Professor Rafi Hossain is the only person who has graduated with a BSc, a MSc, and a PhD in petroleum engineering. The only person from the University of the West Indies. I did not only want to hear comments from Trinidad and Tobago, so I went to Rupert's alma mater also, Frank's alma mater, and my alma mater. And if Tenzing is here, he told me he was coming, he may not be able to meet alma mater. I went to the Pennsylvania State University to hear Dr. John Wang comments. Thank you, John. Dr. David Alexander, you heard him a few minutes ago, the assistant professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. When I met David, David told me a particular guy told him that if you want to learn something, and I'm gonna paraphrase, but you need to meet Andrew Jupiter. And from that day, David has been calling me regularly. David, Alexander, you have to talk because you represent the next generation. All right? Mr. Fitzroy Harewood, President of Point Fortin Nigeria Limited. Thank you also for comments. All of these persons commented on my book. And you will see all of the comments in my book. They read the book, and I told them I want to hear from you exactly what you think about the book. And I'm very pleased that you are here today to hear what I have to say. Also, the additional persons who shared the thoughts this evening, thanks very much. Mr. Rupert Menz, as you know, he was my boss. Frank Lukin was also my boss. So see, my childhood friend, Leroy Williams. And I'm glad how you have, within those 6 pages, I recognize that it's important for you now to write about Grande Riviere and to write about the North Coast because you have a better knowledge of the North Coast than I do. Dr. Vernon Paltu, also President of National Energy. And I have a lot of stories about Vernon. I thought I was about to say one, but because of time, I'm going to move on. This is a 50-year journey. Let me start with Team Shell 1971. My department was headed by Mr. Bashat Ali, former senator. My technical journey started at Shell. And my seniors taught me the following. Standards are of paramount importance. Commit to achieving excellence. Know what to do and why to do it. Match the theory with the practical. Work as a team. Keep a clean workplace. Shell, and I understand there's a guy here from Shell, but he's no longer at Shell. I understand he's at Atlantic LNG. CEO of Atlantic LNG, Ron Adams. There may be others, but Ron, if you meet a guy who at that point in time in the 70s was trained by Shell in Venezuela or in Nigeria, and you meet one in Trinidad, they will tell you the same thing, what Shell did. I hope I did justice to your learnings, Shell. Team number 2, 25 years I remained there, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. In 1979, I walked in there, I remember. I started an operations section, formerly development section, which was then Ministry of Petroleum and Mines, as Rupert said. I'm extremely proud to see my team here. When I walked in, the first person I saw today was Mr. Shahid Mohammed, our senior chemical engineer, and he's here. Stanley Reed was chief mechanical engineer. And also leading teams, and also Tenzing Ramlakan, who sent a note for me while I was about to come in to the meeting, to this group, but I did not read it. But probably, if he's here, I'm very pleased that he will be here. But he was here. Those 3 guys, it was a team. And Carly DeBoog, who is here in the front, senior petroleum engineer, inspector. Thank you very much. Senior, graduate. Just as how Rupert graduated me to doctor, I want to graduate you to. I want to graduate you to engineer. Senior, all have made a great contribution to the development of the petroleum industry. When I left as director of operations, all of those guys were able to fill the posts. The 3 senior engineers, because everywhere I went to, my objective is to try to leave persons who will be better when I move on. On to Director of Energy Planning. What a team. Thanks for coming. Vernon De Silva. I'm looking for you, Vernon. I'm looking for you. But I saw other representatives of energy planning. Persons like Selwyn Lashley, Heidi Wong, Pat Sinersweet, David Smoller, and a number of others. I saw Ms. Lynch today. I know that I know that others may be coming. But again, when I left energy planning, at least 3 persons were capable to hold a position. Vernon De Silva, Selwyn Lashley, and Heidi Wong. Until permanent secretary. Once again, when I left, Selwyn Lashley and Heidi Wong, they both, when I left the ministry as such, and my understanding is that they both filled, and as you may be aware, permanent secretary positions. I must state that I received support from the administrative personnel and secretaries. Very good support. That support was definitely tremendous. Many thanks for coming. I saw them. Mrs. Hyde, I've not seen you for so long, so many years, as such. But you look the same. Don't feel anyhow, you look the same. Many thanks for coming. The entire administrative staff, I saw them walking in. Those who left single came back married. Without you, it would have been impossible to complete the many tasks. Team number 3, I want to remain here for a while. I don't want to go further because let me go back to team number 2 for a while. The negotiating team that I led, which negotiated 19 production sharing contracts, some of which are still producing and earning revenue for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Miss Joyce Lynch, daughter, called me and said she's so sad something happened to her, and I'm not privileged to reveal it, but she said all the plans were to be here. Joyce introduced me to the International Petroleum Negotiators, and I became the first Trinidadian to become a director of EIPN. I saw Ms. Helena Innes walking today. Happy to see you. I understand that you're now representing the government of Trinidad and Tobago at the Law of the Sea in New York. Very good. Energy planning team, led by Mr. Vernon De Silva, and the negotiating team started the second shift at 6 p.m. Our second shift started at 6 p.m. On many days, our cars were locked in the car park. I thank you from the bottom of my heart on the contribution which the team made to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. One bid round raked in $80 million. $80 million in signature bonuses, only one bid round. And a senior economist said, if we did not do it, Trinidad and Tobago will have been in a very difficult financial situation at the time. $80 million. What a fallacy. What a fallacy to think public servants do not produce. What a lie. What a lie has been conveyed to the nation. We negotiated with the best, the top multinationals in the world, the Shells, the Exxons, the BPs, the Arcos, the Totals, you call them, and I can go on. We gained respect around the world. One day, John Perry, top negotiator, was negotiating for ELF. And I want to give you another story. There are many stories. I cannot give you all because of the time. We were both cricket lovers. I broke off the negotiations. I took him to Guayakara Park at Point Fortin to see Trinidad versus Barbados. Brian Lara made a century that evening. We had no discussions about the negotiations back to the hotel at Hilton because I had to jump back at the Hilton and drive back to San Fernando where I lived. No discussions. The next day, John Perry came into the meeting. He tendered the words, it being understood that. I asked Joyce, our senior counsel, is this okay? She answered in the affirmative. The team also agreed. The great Brian Lara was able to win battles off the playing field for Trinidad and Tobago. Lara mesmerized John Perry with his cricket. I cracked up when we initiated the contract because I knew the world's #1 batsman did it again. Victory for Trinidad and Tobago. Red, white, and black. Goal. We introduced the most progressive sharing contract at that time, according to Dr. Petro van Meurs. It is being used as a model by other countries. I want to say our team had no consultants. That does not mean that consultants are not important, but our team had no consultants. We have put in place a production sharing contract that deals with the vagaries of oil price and natural gas. In that system, as oil price increases, government take increases. As gas price increases, government take also increases. So, as production increases, government take also increases. All successive governments approved our approach. In fact, the 19 production sharing contracts, which I was given the pleasure to be the leader of a powerful team, successive cabinets accepted all our recommendations for the benefit of red, white, and black gold. So the discussion which will take place one more time on oil taxation within the next 4 days, as the Minister of Finance presents a budget, was put to rest by this team. Why? Because I said as production increases, government take increases. You don't have to go back to sit and negotiate. You ought not to, unless circumstances really change. But the point I want to make here, the only discussion is on exploration production licenses, which in my opinion must be looked at very carefully. What do I mean? You don't give tax incentives unless you have an approved work program. The work program is the most important thing. All what you hear is tax incentives. You must have an approved work program for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years before you even consider a tax incentive. Because that work program will translate into increased oil production, and that oil gas production, and that work program will even go further, will ensure that the oil industry continues for a while. We were graduates from UWI, from the University of Dundee, from the Gas Institute in Chicago, from UK universities, and from Penn State. Training was pivotal. As you probably remember, we had to utilize the training fund, and the annual training program was submitted to Cabinet for approval every year. And the permanent secretary who is here today is as a result of that. I think the permanent secretary get one of those scholarships that we had, the present permanent secretary. So we were not only looking for at ourselves, we were looking beyond. Training was critical. We had scholarships, as I just said. We had first-class technical equipment to match our competitor from technical equipment bonus. What an environment for success. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a legal instrument, and I talk about training. I saw Miss Yard, I know she has changed her name now, walked in. She was in charge of training, as writing training, and Miss Blades was in charge of that. I saw them walking in today. But I want to say something here. There were casualties along the way. For example, my bosses, Rupert and Frank, will speak about the closure of high-pressure wells at the Namoko. That was casualty. As a young engineer, I was involved in calculating tubing head pressures. Caroline and the inspectors will speak about the closure of a rig because of unsafe conditions. We fought fiercely as a team, not only for staff, but the workers of the industry, a high level of safety. Very brave, yes, we were. Minister of Energy and Engineering Industries took a note to Cabinet for professional allowance for technical officers. I understand, if I'm correct, that the professional allowances are still in effect today. They are still, and that was when? 1998. And the professional, thank you, Cupid, and you remember well. Why? Because some technical officers, the professional allowance was close to the basic salary. Isn't that a great thing? One morning you get up and you start getting money that you never thought you'd ever be able to get. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Joy Crease is not here today, but I spoke with her. She drafted a note. She took me, I give you a story, another story, many stories I have. She took me at the home of a retired chief personnel officer. She took me at the home of that person who actually wrote a few sentences of that note. Some of you who are beneficial to such may be having knowledge of this for the first time. Let me say, we worked professionally, we worked hard, we worked smart, and we worked tough. One minister, when leaving the Ministry of Energy, wrote every single public servant at the ministry, thanking us for our contribution to the nation. He thought when he came to the ministry, he will find public servants only just pushing papers. But he met a team of professionals that was second to none. What a fallacy. What a lie that public servants do not work. It is a lie that continues to be perpetuated. We contributed above and beyond. Thank you, Minister, for recognizing this. And I must add, I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. I am sure our productivity level surpassed many private sector organizations with the scarce resources we had at that time. We worked for Trinidad and Tobago as a city, red, white, and black color of our nation flag, led the way, Trinidad and Tobago. We wanted nothing less than gold. Team 4, because of time, National Energy and Energy Strategic Unit. We marshaled a team at National Energy that Vernon said, who, Vernon, you placed me at the helm. As I told you, every time I leave a place, it's important for me to leave someone or more than one person. I see John Jones here today. I saw my secretary at Energy Strategic Unit, Miss Janet Batson today. I said Janet Charles is Petrochin. It's June Batson. June Batson. I'm missing the Janet and the June, but it's June Batson. Pleasure. Again, there were at least 2 candidates to take over from me there. National Energy, and I will talk a bit later in my document about the first person I met at National Energy when I entered National Energy. Team 5, University of the West Indies. Prof. Hussain, thank you very much. I left industry and I started moving to academia. I want to thank the entire chemical engineering department, the entire team, Professor Hussain, lecturers and administrative staff, Nats, who designed the work on the program, Paul Singh, who those slides, worked on the slides. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move to the inevitable energy transition, I am pleased to report we are in very good hands. I see Dr. Budlad here today, coming in. Dr. David Alexander, who spoke, who's here from UTT. We marshaled the 2 universities together because we are small. We have few strong technical people. These 2 young guys, they are powerful. They will move to the next level in our movement from fossil fuel to net zero carbon. They are here, and they are here today because they are committed. Dr. Lawrence Sobers from UWI and Dr. Rafi Hussain, who mentors them. Professor Dr. Rafi. Again, partnerships are being built with the local university, UTT, and international university. University of Austin, Penn State. Partnerships are also built with international energy companies at this time. PPTT sponsoring us. BHP sponsoring us. Now Woodside. EOG Resources, Pirenco, Trinity Exploration, Heritage Company, and our #1 supporter financially, because I think I knew where the money was at in the R&D, the Ministry of Energy and Engineering Industries. #1 supporter, and I can say $3 million a year. Thank you very much, PS Penelope Batcho-Nice. I sincerely thank Proman. I understand that Proman is not here. My daughter mentioned she got a text because it's an important, something came up. Supported me during the last 9 years at UWI. Many thanks, because I'm the whole of the Dennis Patrick MHTL tray. Very, very, very thankful for you all. I want to do something tonight that probably I've not done openly. I want to thank successful governments for giving me the opportunity to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I was on I wouldn't say everyone, I was on an official delegation with several prime ministers through my term. In fact, I represented one prime minister at a conference, and I was a member of many state boards. I think the only state board I was not an energy state board I was not a member, director of was National Petroleum Company. And I should tell you another story, but I'll have to be brief on this one. Let me say something about Petrotrin. Petrotrin was one of those boards, and I'm so Fitzroy, as a good point man, is able to leave you thinking when you finish. He's able to ask you, what did he not say? And Petrotrin was a multifaceted organization, a complex organization. As he said, this was one of the most challenging roles that I have ever undertaken. Third time on the board because I was there at the formation of Petrotrin. Faced with an environment with lower for longer oil price, a newly elected government that was still determining policies, a powerful trade union, an aging workforce, and an outdated infrastructure, I am satisfied. And I saw Leonard Prescott here this evening. Thank you for coming, Leonard, our finance man. I hope, if there are others, I hope I have not missed them. But as Fitzroy said, there are two other vice presidents here this evening. I'm so glad that you are here. But I want to say something here. I made two internal commitments when I took up the position as chairman of the board. The first was to perform my duties to the very best of my abilities towards the goal of restoring the company to profitability. That was what I wanted, the best of my ability. And the second commitment was a private commitment, was to serve for a period not more than 3 years. I dispatched my responsibilities at as the same level of dedication of service which I have served my country. And at this time, I wish to thank all energy companies, upstream, downstream, for supporting me during my 50-year journey. We were a very important part, you were a very important part of my journey. And now at UWI, you are still a very important part of my journey. The number of persons who contributed to my book are too numerous to mention. And I said the first person I met at National Energy when I entered was a lady by Miss Sheila McIntosh. And she's the lead researcher, and I saw her daughter this evening also, Real McIntosh. Thank you very much for your commitment to ensure the completion of the book. Thank you, chairs, for your design. Osha and Twine for Sports Stream TT. I'm very thankful for that. We have journeyed together, and I hope that your journey with me has influenced you. I'm referring to all the teens. Your journey with me has influenced you to become a better person, because you have certainly helped me positively to work for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The people of Trinidad and Tobago gave me 3 scholarships. And when we were about to come back from Penn State, my wife was about to start a PhD. She was given that opportunity was presented to her that she could move in the direction of PhD further. And we decided to come home. And we decided to come home to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Let us not forget those who have grown up before us, even shedding their blood for a better Trinidad and Tobago. We ought to work for Trinidad and Tobago. And we will be celebrating 46 years of republicanism. And through this month, in the next 2 days, and through this month, we have celebrated 60 years of independence. Let us celebrate. Teams, our journey was not in vain, but in my view, to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, so that others can receive strength from red, white, and black gold to continue this journey. Finally, and this should firstly also, is Almighty God that gave me the wisdom, the strength, and guidance on my 50-year journey. He has been very faithful to me. I'm extremely grateful for his guidance. Without him, ladies and gentlemen, I would have been unable to overcome the challenges that I face. You made it happen, and therefore I must spend it. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Professor Jupiter, for those powerful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, as Master of Ceremonies, I can rest assured that what we have heard from the various professionals and the author was very motivating and convincing to all that red, white, and black gold, which is based on the past, present, and future of the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago, as seen and experienced by Professor Andrew Jupiter, a true son of the soil and recipient of Shaconia Medal Gold, the second highest state decoration of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, for his contribution to public service, is a must-read book. Congrats, Professor Jupiter, on this achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this program. You are all invited by Professor Jupiter and his family for refreshments at the Undercroft in Block 1. I just want to share some information with you. The cost for the paperback copy is US dollars $27.99, and the hardcover copy is US dollars $34.99. Order forms are available, and the book will also be available on Amazon. Copies can be seen in the Undercroft, where we will be having refreshments, and at the UWI library. Thank you very much for attending.
Congratulations. I have a message for you. God has sent me to you. I have a message for you. God has sent me to you. Them say, them tell you, say you can never be the one. God say, make I tell you, say that you choose in 1 month, in 1 week, you will sing a new song. In 2 days, lesser than you will hear. Congratulations, you're in the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for you. And you will come back with a new song to sing. God is good. Yes, you will come again with a new song of praise. God is good. Oh, congratulations. 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 See what the Lord has done for you. Congratulations. God is good. Them say that I can never be all that I see. I've seen that God is greater than that. Who can battle with the Lord? Nobody. Who can change His mind around me? Through many years, in many ways, I have seen His faithfulness ever and ever. Yeah. Congratulations, I have seen the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for me. And I have come back with a new song to sing. My God is good. Yes, I will come again with a new song of praise. My God is good. Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. See what the Lord has done for me. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Time for jubilation. Congratulations. No more tribulation. I bring you good news where you cannot refuse. Oh Lord, I told you with Christ that you can never lose. Oh God, Woman, I beg you, give me your attention. Very, very soon you will share your testimony. One by one you will tell your testimony. Bigger than money, we say sweeter than honey.
Congratulations, you've seen the glory of God. Congratulations, He has done it for you. And you'll come back